Welcome, my friends, to another edition of More Bad News, brought to you as always by Camel Cigarettes. Take the Camel's Challenge. Smoke Camels for 30 days and see for yourself why more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. Well, my friends, it's been another week of very bad news. It's just becoming harder and harder to maintain a sunny disposition. Last week, James Hansen, the father of climate science, released a paper with the unusual title of "Uh-oh, Now What?", in which he says that global temperatures in June and July shot up far beyond anything that we've seen in the last 140 years, and that we will certainly pass the 1.5-degree warming this year. But of even more concern is that he anticipates the global warming rate to accelerate by at least 50%. And in fact, the feedback systems could well account for more global warming, more global CO2 than our emissions account for. And also the indications are that 1.5, we could blow through 1.7 easily. So if you would like to see the paper, it's only 5 pages. Just Google James Hansen. Uh-oh, that's all you need. My favorite climate paleontologist is Paul Beckwith. He reviewed James Hansen's last week, and he reviewed a new one this week. And in his latest video, he notes that the climate tipping points are irreversible. Basically, we are on a toboggan slide to hell. And when we flip to a new climate state, global food supplies will be seriously threatened. We can see that already happening. So his latest video was about the OECD report. This is the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. I believe it's the United Nations organization, and it's entitled Climate Tipping Points. It's also available for download, PDF, it's free. This report reviews evidence that overshooting 1.5C may read that as will, push the Earth over several tipping points, leading to irreversible and severe changes in the climate system. If triggered, say, read that as when triggered, tipping points impacts will rapidly cascade through socioeconomic and ecological systems, leading to severe effects on human natural systems and imposing important challenges to human adaptation. I mean, we already see that. I mean, I don't talk about Trump very much, but you can see the distortions, the craziness of global politics today. It really is a part of the impact of these climate changes that we're seeing. A particular concern are the likely collapse of the West Antarctic Greenland ice sheets and the abrupt melting of permafrost grounds in the Arctic, which will result in additional sea level rise and greenhouse gas releases, leading to more warming. It's a feedback loop. Based on the most recent science and consultations with renowned experts, the paper argues that overshooting 1.5C is almost inevitable and will lead to irreversible and severe impacts, which must be avoided. You read that as which are unavoidable, heightening the urgency to drastically reduce emissions this decade. Because we already know that no matter how drastic the need is to reduce emissions, we are not going to do anything to reduce emissions. We already know that that's over. We're heading towards disaster, and we're not going to do anything to put the brakes on the collapse of our civilization. So climate change is creating adverse conditions for both ecosystems and societies that go beyond anything that we've seen in recorded history. When these climate tipping points are crossed, these trends will, of course, worsen exponentially, leading to profound changes in our planet and in the natural and socioeconomic systems that sustain it. And just to drive the point home, we're watching an unprecedented Pacific hurricane heading for in Los Angeles right now. The New York Times, reporting on the Canadian fires, said that the wildfires burned a staggering, this was July 17th, 25 million acres. It's over 30 million acres now. An area roughly the size of Kentucky, with more than a month of peak fire season to go in 2023. Canada has already eclipsed all previous annual records. And the last one, 1989, was 18 million acres. We've already past 30 million. You can see the changes. These are not small changes. These are really large changes, and they are a new starting point. So next year, you're not going to start with 18 million was the largest fires we've ever seen. Now it's going to be 40 million or 50 million. It's, God knows what it's going to be. And fires are burning all around the world. You have to recognize that all of this is not just happening in Canada, it's also happening in the Arctic and Siberia. The Russian fires are, if anything, worse than the Canadian fires. I'm a little bit behind in responding to the new educational guidelines from Florida related to the topic of slavery, which is a topic that I researched. But I wanted to share a few personal encounters that I had with this topic. So let me take you back to the early 1980s. I'm a graduate student at the University of Illinois, and I'm looking through the library, collecting books related to eugenics, and I come across this book here. This is Human Variations, the Biopsychology of Age, Race, and Sex. It was in the library, on the library shelf, and it is published by Academic Press, 1978, and it has essays by all outstanding academics, members of the National Academy of Sciences and the Royal Academy of Sciences, so the conclusion to the book is written by C.D. Darlington, and so just imagine, I'm just beginning to study these topics. And I open up the conclusion, and this is what I read. Thousands of Negroids were removed from Africa, where the women bore the children and did the work, while the men did the fighting and kept the population stable in numbers. That's the way it was in Africa. On the North American and West Indian plantations, they all had work. There was neither famine nor unemployment. There was very little war. The environment was more favorable than anything that they had experienced in Africa. As slaves, they improved in health and increased in numbers. That's what slavery will do for you, folks. When the Negroids were liberated from agricultural slavery, they were thrown free to shift for themselves in largely Caucasoid societies. Discipline and protection having been withdrawn from them, they were offered the beguiling prospect of life, first in American and then in European cities. These simple, unskilled rural people were suddenly offered irregular employment combined with opportunities of drink and drugs, gambling and prostitution, and no reliable means of productive, creative, or congenial labor, which is what you had. As a slave, you have reliable, productive, congenial labor. That's what slavery is all about. The intellectually well-endowed races, classes, and societies have a moral responsibility for the problems of race mixture, of immigration and exploitation that have arisen from their exercise of economic and political power. They may hope to escape from these responsibilities by claiming an intellectual and therefore moral equality between all races. But the chapters of this book step by step deprive them of the scientific and historical evidence that might support such a comfortable illusion. European man is morally as well as intellectually responsible, equally for the splendors and the miseries that he has brought forth to mankind. For while creating his own environment to which he is perhaps capable of adapting himself, he has also created for other peoples throughout the world environments to which they, especially in the tropical world, are disastrously ill adapted. So you see, the problem wasn't slavery. The problem was emancipation. That hasn't yet gotten into the Florida textbooks, but we'll see. Wait till I get around to reading something. But they may have. Well, yeah, anyway. Well, with that thought in mind, I just wanted to share one other tidbit that I found while I was going through the archives of the ASPCA in New York. And here it is. So this is 1866, and I'm looking at the archives of the ASPCA, the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. This is Henry Bergh began the organization in 1866, and he was a brilliant when it came to publicity. And what he did was he arrested. He had the power to arrest people for cruelty to animals, and he arrested a ship captain for cruelty to turtles. They would bring in the turtles and the sea turtles, and they would be on their backs, and their fins would be tied, and then they would distribute it for turtle soup around the city. And Henry Bergh went to Louis Agassiz, the most famous biologist of the time, Harvard University, and he asked him, can you testify to the fact that the turtles are suffering? And Agassiz wrote, and this was quoted in the paper, the best evidence I can afford that they suffer in that position is that they die if it is much protracted. And yet turtles are among the animals which resist longest the privations of all kinds. Is it not the fact that they may die merely from the attitude in which they are forcibly kept the most complete evidence of their suffering? For what else would cause death, if not pain from the unnatural pressures on parts brought into unaccustomed positions? Now, the letter to the New York Day book went on like this. Now we desire to ask the professor a question. If Negroes thrown out of a certain position, that is slavery, die at a rate of 10% per annum, while in the other position they increased at more than the usual rate for the white population, which is the natural position? The position in which they increase and multiply, or that in which they perish from the face of the earth? If turtles die when on their back, is not the Negro as emphatically on his back when he dies out as is the turtle? If the best evidence that a being suffers in a certain position is that they die out from it, what more proof do we need of the inhumanity and cruelty of tearing a race from its natural protectors? We pause for reply. This is New York, so this is not Georgia. Agassiz replies, Dear Sirs, the New York Day book of Saturday, October the 6th has an article headed Cruelty to Turtles and Negroes, which I enclose with a request to print the following answer. This is Louis Agassiz replying. It is true that the Negroes have been dying at a frightful rate during the trial of their passage from bondage to freedom, but the comparison of the day book is not applicable in this case. Let the editor remember that the Negroes were formerly brought from Africa to this country in slave ships, pretty much the way the turtle dealers are now forwarding their wares to New York. If the day book will directly affirm that that practice should be resumed, I will admit that the turtles may with propriety be treated henceforth as they are now. Yours truly, Louis Agassiz. So there you have it, from 1866 to 1978 to today's Florida history textbooks. And I think we'll let that be for this week. I'll see you next week with more bad news.